Good morning, my name is Jeff. I'm one of the volunteers here at Restormel, and in the next half hour, and I'll try and keep it within the 30 minutes because I know you're keen to get away, I'll tell you about a bloody battle that was fought around here. I'll tell you about the richest man in the country who built the castle, and about its most notable resident, aka the Black Prince. So we're going to start here. Reason for starting, this is not going to be a linear tour through history. I'll be flip-flopping back and forth over 2,000 years of history. So, you know, if I get something wrong, stop me and tell me. Okay? So we're starting here really because I'm going to use a bit of imagination here, but there's a nice picture in the guidebook. There's a nice picture on the entrance there. Just shows what it looked like here in the castle's heyday. And we're talking the 13th, 14th century. If we'd been stood here at that time, we'd have been in the midst of a very bustling, busy, hard-working community, because there's a whole village out here whose reason for being was to look after the castle, look after the residents of the castle, and also look after the big deer park. That was their main exercise. There's a big deer park around here. The castle essentially was built, or the circular castle, essentially built as a grand hunting lodge, and there were 300 plus head of deer around here, the biggest deer park in Cornwall, and that was pretty much the earls and dukes would come here to hunt, bring their chums with them, and have a jolly good time killing things all around here, while the ladies could promenade around the upstairs looking out through the battlements. So out here, if we'd been stood there then, we would have been looking out, bustling village, lots of people coming and going. The entrance to the site was over there by that oak tree, and the whole area was fenced in. We had stabling, probably 2 stable blocks down here for in excess of 100 horses. There was a big chapel which existed from where this grassy mound is here to beyond the seat over there. That was for the workers and visitors. There's another chapel, as some of you have been inside will know, and that was for the lords and the ladies and their guests, separate. They couldn't worship with the hoi polloi. So there's a new chapel over here. A bit of housing, we would think, and other agricultural buildings, and all that was there for about a couple of centuries. And then it disappeared as the castle declined. The village went, and that was it. There was very little found. We've done topographical surveys of the area, so we know where the buildings were. And latterly, it was only about 40, 50 years ago, we found just about where that waste paper bin is there, the footings of a huge bread oven, 14 feet in diameter, and we think it was about 30 odd feet tall. So they must have liked a lot of bread. So we did find those, and there are probably other things still to be found here, but we don't really know. So we're going to go this way around here. We're going to go just this way a wee bit. As I say, this is not a linear tour through history. I'm going to be flip-flopping a bit. First of all, the gatehouse here. Now we think the gatehouse is evidence of an earlier castle that was here, probably built in the early years of the Norman invasion. So we're talking late 11th, probably early 12th century. The gatehouse, we think that precedes this castle. It's a different style, and we also think those of you who have been around in the castle, you may have seen some deep pits in the ground. There's a lot of discussion over the years what these were. We think they were where some substantial towers existed for a previous castle. So that's a bit of evidence towards that, and the gatehouse itself here. Just pausing here for a minute, we look over to this hillside here, this flat-topped hill which is slightly higher than this one. There's evidence there of a much earlier building, and in fact the Romans were over there. The Romans had a fort on that hill, so we're talking 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years before even the beginnings of this castle was created. And the Romans were there. They built a fort on the site of an Iron Age fort which had existed before that, and the Romans were here to exploit tin and iron. And we know that because there's evidence of Cornish tin being exported throughout the Roman Empire at this period. It was much sought after. That's what they were here for. And also it's no accident that it sits on a huge iron lode which would later be exploited in the 19th century. And tin it's probably the reason that this castle came here 1,000 years after the Romans had departed. So we've got the circular castle here. Now, circular castles are not unique. There are a number of them, even in Cornwall there are. So it's not unique, but it is unusual. It is an unusual castle, and I'll explain some of the reasons for that in a moment. But just looking here, these openings here, these big openings, these would have been big arrow slit windows. You know, the ones that are like this, that if you were so minded you could get a crossbow in there and do a bit of shooting. They were there, and that gives evidence to the fact that we think the main entrance to the site was over there, because they look straight over to what would have been the gateway. So they would be there keeping an eye out who was coming and going. It wasn't that anybody was going to invade, really. The castle never really been invaded, but just a watchful eye. That's really what it was there for. Looking at the castle is about 120 feet, 110, 120 feet in diameter. Some of the walls in places are well in excess of 8 feet thick, and the walls in some places are getting on to 20 feet high. So quite a substantial construction. One of the most frequently asked questions as we're walking around here is, if you look at the walls, it's dotted with little square holes. They're all over the place, all random, and they go all the way around, and you'll see them inside as well. Anybody hazard a guess as to what they might be? Okay, well, they're called putt logs, and apparently that's a term still in use today, and I didn't know that until some builders told me that a few months back. Scaffolding, isn't it? Absolutely, that's it, you've got it. And they were where the little holes are, or you know, holes about this size, where wooden poles would have gone in, because the scaffolding used by the original builders was timber. So they would put them in, go up, build a platform, and go up a bit further and up a bit further. And once they'd finished that section, they would pull them out or cut them off, and then over the centuries, the weather and the conditions, the filling has fallen out, so we now got this random pattern of holes. So that's what they are. As I was saying, it's not unusual to have a circular castle, but what marks this one out is extremely unusual are these holes in the walls here. These are not random holes knocked in later. These, as you'll see them, they're all the way around, large openings, and these were picture windows, huge picture windows built in when the castle was created, and they were glazed, which was extremely unusual and very, very expensive at the time. So people said, well, you know, the castle was built here as to defend the estuary, to defend the traffic going up and down the river. It wasn't. It was built as a luxurious home, a hunting lodge, a countryside seat, and it was built, the circular castle was built in one go. It was all planned, we now believe, with the inner wall and the apartments within it, all in one go. And it was built by a guy called Edmund. Edmund was the second Earl of Cornwall. He was a nephew of Henry III, and his father Richard, who obviously was the first Earl of Cornwall, he acquired the site by rather nefarious means. We think there was a castle there. Richard was a very aggressive, very keen to expand his wealth and his influence, and he persuaded the widow of a guy who tried to keep the castle out of the crown's clutches to give it to him. I don't think it was the sort of guy you said no to. So she gives it to him. Bad news for him, within about 3 or 4 years he shuffles off and leaves his son Edmund to get on with it. Now Edmund is nothing if not his father's son. He's very aggressive, he's very, very wealthy already, and he's just about to become a whole lot wealthier. He quickly realizes that the tin industry, the tin trade, which was already going on in Lostwithiel, the little town just down here, and had been from Roman times and even before Roman times. But Edmund quickly realized that if he if he could seize control of this entire industry, he was on to the gravy train. So he whacks a big stone bridge across the river so he can control all the traffic. The river at that time is much wider, deeper, and allows seagoing ships to come up and down. And he builds a huge complex in the town covering 2.5 acres on which he centralises full control of the tin industry. So you've got smelting houses for creating the tin, got a banking hall, a parliament hall, a court building, administrative buildings, all on the 2.5 acre site in the town there, which he makes the capital, the medieval capital of Cornwall. So to cap it off, he wants somewhere grand, swanky to entertain his chums, and that's how he comes to create the round castle that we've got here. And let's keep walking a wee bit, because I'm conscious that you might want to get to lunch or something. So Edmund creates the round castle. It has it built, and it has these big picture windows put in it. That darker area of stone, by the way, is where a chimney is or was, and it's just heat that has damaged the stonework. But Edmund creates this grand castle, and it lays it out as part of the landscape. So the moat here never had any water in it, but it was created so that the bank could be pushed up against the castle. The castle doesn't sit on top of this mound, it's within it. And the mound itself goes up to the first floor level, the beginnings of the first floor. And that was all part of the design, and it was a grand plan. So when it's finished, just to create the picture, Edmund has it rendered and painted white, so it would just gleam in the sunshine. If you were sat across there having a cup of tea in the Dutchy cafe there, you'd be looking out across here, this great gleaming building here. And this is just part of what Edmund wanted to create. He wanted to demonstrate his power, his influence, and his authority. He was extremely powerful and extremely wealthy. He used to lend his uncle, the king, money. And we estimate that the tin trade was adding to his already vast fortunes to the tune of something like £6,000 a year. That's give or take 7 million in today's money. So you can see why he would be so keen to centralise his power here, and that's what he wanted to create. So unlike lots of castles, this has been built as a grand home. And I kind of have this picture that Edmund's going to sit down with the builder, you know, as you would if you were planning a new home, and Edmund and the builder's going to say to him, well, my lord, yes, round castle, very nice, very popular at the moment, and of course you want it to be a castle, don't you? So we'll have some battlements. So we put battlements all around it. And a castle, well, it's got to have a drawbridge. It did have a drawbridge. Where the causeway is now going into the castle was a drawbridge. And a portcullis, yes, it had a portcullis. And the moat. Got to have a moat in a castle, haven't you? Never had any water in it, but you've got to have a moat. And oh, by the way, my lord, this year, just coming in, very popular, you would like some nice picture windows, wouldn't you? So there you go, you get this theme running, that it's a designer castle, and it's there for this purpose, to entertain Edmund when he came with his wealthy chums, and they'd go hunting around it. That's what he wanted to do. So we've got picture window there, big picture window there. This on the outside of the main hall, and that demonstrates how castles are thought of, particularly medieval, because it's been dark, dingy, damp places. This wasn't. It was lit, it had these big picture windows in, and windows on the other side of the apartments, so it would have been brilliantly lit. It would have been a very nice place to entertain. More of these sort of arrow slot windows here, which are on an inner staircase, which go up through the middle of the wall. And it comes to a little bit of a mystery here. We've got this opening, or this square opening here in the middle of the wall, which we know was a fireplace. Okay, fireplace, and we know that if you look just above this window here, running right to the side of the chapel there, you can see this line. Now we're pretty sure that was a roof line of some kind of lean-to building. Don't quite know what it was constructed of or how, but it would leant up against that wall, maybe propped up by huge posts. We don't really know that. We don't know what it was there for, and the biggest mystery of all, we can't fathom out how you got in or out of it from within the castle, because we haven't yet come across anywhere that looks like a blocked up doorway. So we think there may have been one in the chapel wall there, which would lend itself to the suggestion that whatever this building was, it was connected with the chapel, and it was maybe the priest's room where the priest would and his assistants would keep some of their valuables. But the short answer is we don't know. And there's no sign of it, no remains other than that roof line and that hole in the wall. The chapel here, which Edmund had put in, again constructed out the wall, sticking out from the perimeter castle, the perimeter of the castle, is dedicated to St Mary, to the Virgin Mary. It is said that it was very lavishly decorated. There were some very valuable ornaments and religious items in there, all of which have disappeared over the years. And we think it also, there would have been a crypt below it. We're not sure about that. That may have been blocked up, as we'll see when we get inside. But one of the interesting things about the castle, about the chapel here, is that in all its history, the castle only saw action, fighting, bloodletting here on one occasion, and that was when it was already a ruin. And we're talking now about the 17th century, 1644, the height of the English Civil War. A huge bloody battles going on around here, and for a brief time the castle is about to play a very small part in that. We've got 10,000 parliamentary forces plus 2,000 horses pinned down in the nearby town of Lostwithiel, which at that time was only had about 500 population, so they were not very welcome guests. And of course the English Civil War was the battle between Parliament and the Crown as to who should govern, who should be able to levy taxes. And all around it were 20,000 royalists, led by no less a person than Charles I himself, all encamped all around it, completely surrounding the parliamentary forces. And it is a bloody standoff. It's a vicious, bloody battle, and it goes on for about 6 weeks, and it ends badly for the parliamentarians. They suffer their greatest loss of life in the whole of the Civil War, and we estimate that at the end of this 5-6 week siege that was going on, there were in excess of 4,000 dead just in the hills around here. So it was and more were to die after being taken prisoner. But it was a very bloody battle. For a few days, about 5 days we estimate, the castle was central to this. The parliamentary forces had got in, probably not very much to stop them in all honesty, because the castle was already pretty much in decline at that time and had suffered quite a lot of vandalism, I think we'd call it these days, and was in a poor state. So not much to stop them getting in, but they did get in, and where this lighter coloured stone is here, had existed for several hundred years before 3 big stained glass windows. They'd probably been knocked out before the Civil War, so there were 3 big openings there. The parliamentary forces blocked that up so that they could put a cannon right up on the top there as a gun mounting, because it was a good vantage point, and they could do a lot of damage, they thought, to the royalist forces. Bad news for them was that one of their number, we think, opened the door. In swept Sir Richard Grenville and 600 royalists, and in no time at all they'd been overwhelmed. 30 prisoners were taken and marched away, and they left it, and that's it. The castle goes back to sleep again then. It's just abandoned. There's a report done for Parliament at the end of the Civil War in 1649, which concludes that it's Restormel Castle. It's not even worth knocking down, or in their words, it's not worth the knocking down of. So there we are, and that's what happens. So it just it gets left behind. And it's true to say that through most of its history, the castle has been unoccupied, unloved, uncared for, neglected, than it's ever been lived in. It's only been lived in for about 70 years or so in the whole of its history. So, end of the Civil War, it goes back to sleep again, and it stays that way for quite some time. Just a couple of things to pick out as we go around here. We've got a big picture window. We're not sure whether that would have been a stained glass or plain glass window in the side of the chapel. Another big picture window here. This is the Lord's apartment. A nice big picture window for him, so he could look out when he wasn't hunting or whatever he wanted to do over the countryside. More of these putlock holes dotted about all over the place. We've got here one of two what I didn't tell you was that, as well as being very stylish outside, the castle had a running water supply. It had already had a well which existed from the earlier castle, and there was a running water. Edmund had it brought in culvert from spring up on the hillside there, came in through a lead culvert, so it probably wasn't all that good for them really, but it was running water. And also within the castle we have indoor toilets, one of which, the back of it is here, this little bit that sticks out here. You can see that inside. It doesn't tell you that's what it is, but that it was the latrine, the toilet. Please don't use it because it's not been cleaned for 700 years. And there is another one on the first floor level, probably for the use of the guards, which goes straight out the wall and into the moat here. So I think if we'd been wandering around here in the 13th, 14th century, it'd have been a bit smelly on a hot day around here. A couple of things to note here before we go inside, and I'll give you a quick tour of the inner apartments of the castle. Got these big holes here, one there and one there. We're pretty sure that these had been put in on the instructions of Edward, aka the Black Prince, who was often away fighting most of the time away fighting in France, and he may have thought that somebody might nip in and steal his castle, so he was very keen to improve security. So we think these were to position what were called brattices, fighting brattices, big wooden platforms that in times of, if the castle were ever to be threatened, and it wasn't, but Edward wasn't to know that, big timbers would be put through those holes, and outside would be lowered down this big wooden platform, so that had it ever come under attack, the soldiers within could stand on these wooden platforms and throw all sorts of nasty stuff down on people who were trying to get in. The fact is, it didn't happen. It was probably one of these exercises just to test security, and then the platforms were taken up, stashed away in the castle and just rotted away. Right, so that brings us all the way round back to the gatehouse again, and as I said, the gatehouse itself is evidence of an older castle than the circular castle, and it did have a drawbridge here before this causeway was built, probably maybe sometime in the 17th, 18th century. But I was talking about Edward, who was a bit security minded. Edward, the Black Prince. Anybody know why his moniker was the Black Prince? It's because of his armour. He wore this magnificently created black burnished armour, head to toe, black helmet, white plume just to finish it off. Very, very fetching. He became, wind back a wee bit, he became the first Duke of Cornwall. His father, Edward III, they're all called Edward, which is very convenient for me. Edward III had trouble filling the earldom of Cornwall. This is Edward III's brother John, he appointed Earl, but John died within a few years. So Edward III decided he's going to create a whole new dynasty, which he does, and he creates the Duchy of Cornwall, which we still have to this day. And he makes, at that time, his 6-year-old son Edward the first Duke of Cornwall. So at the age of 6, Edward becomes a Duke of Cornwall. He gets the castle, he gets all the site, thousands upon thousands of acres of land, and is a very very wealthy man, young man. And later in life, he would become, we'll wander inside now. Later in life, he would become extremely famous. That's a bit of competition, but I'll keep going there. Later in life, he becomes incredibly famous. At the age of just 16 years old, he's placed in charge of most of the English army in France. And he goes on to lead them to significant victories in Crécy, which you may have heard of. Shakespeare alludes to it in a couple of plays, and Poitiers. And he's a very famous young man. Wearing his magnificent black armour, he's said to be devilishly handsome, and a few years later he marries a very glamorous, very controversial, very well-educated lady called Princess Joan of Kent, and together they become the kind of rock star prince and princess of their day. You know, wherever they turned up, people would turn up in their droves. They'd want to be seen. Didn't want to miss a chance to get a selfie with the Black Prince. He was that popular. What he was good at, he kept incredibly good documents. For someone so young, he was very good at it. And there's a whole library of stuff, what we call the WhatsApp messages, emails, texts of the day, between him, the steward here, and London. Poor old steward, Mr. de Kendal, must have been run off his feet, because he was forever getting messages when Edward was over there bashing the French or adding to his great estates in France, because he was the Duke of Bordeaux as well as been the Duke of Cornwall, Prince of Wales and umpteen other titles. He spent a lot of time, most of his time, in France. And there's this messages going backwards and forwards from poor old Walter de Kendal here. He must have been run off his feet, because some of them are quite charming, quite mundane, but some of them are, you know, there's one which goes something along the lines of, this is not verbatim, it's about, please send 40,000 arrows and bows, 2,000 horseshoes, 1,000 horses, and a whole various barrels of beer and all sorts of things. Oh, and make sure they're well protected. And there's kind of this sort of sinister little note at the bottom, you know, make sure that, but we get the impression that other things have gone astray, and Edward is getting a bit hacked off at this, so there's a little cautionary note to the steward. You better get it right this time, Mr. Steward, or you never know. Edward was, he gets mixed press, but he's supposed to be quite just, but he could be quite ruthless and bloody. Anyway, he kept all his records, all very good for us, and there's only 3 times that it's recorded that he comes here: 1354, 1356, 1362. Okay, now that's the one I like the best, because it's coming up to Christmas 1362. Edward and Princess Joan decide they're going to come here and spend Christmas here. They're going to bring a few knights with them, as you do. You didn't go without a few knights in those days. In fact, some of the chroniclers would say when Edward rocked up anywhere, it was the greatest gathering of knights since the days of King Arthur. A very poetic line. Rubbish on history, but you get the idea. Anyway, Edward wants to come here for Christmas, he and Joan. So what do you want for, if you're going to do a bit of swanky entertaining at Christmas, you want to be sure you can get a good Christmas lunch, and what you need for that is a kitchen. So Edward sends instructions for a new kitchen. Step this way. This is what we get. They have this enormous fireplace all the way up to the battlements. Right across here, where that hole is in the wall, and this one here, there was a huge spit, and another one here, I'm going to another lintel across there. So I reckon they could have roasted, I don't know, 20 venison at a time here, or boar. Yuletide boar was what they had for Christmas lunch. No turkeys for them. Yuletide boar, whole boar if you were very rich. If you were very poor, you got a pie with a little symbol of a boar on top of it. But just imagine, this was going at full speed. I mean, it would burn whole trees at a time, I would imagine. So this would be got going. So this is what they put in for the Christmas bash of 1362. And if you want to sort of use a bit of imagination, get the scene here. They know Edward and Joan are coming and a few knights, so the servants have been scurrying around. They want to make sure that every window, every crevice, every shelf was candle lit. They wanted to make sure every fireplace, and the fireplaces in all the apartments were lit. This will be going, you know, the servants would be going crazy, wanting to make sure they got the sprouts on time for the Christmas lunch and all of that. Joan and Edward sweeping here on their horses, accompanied by the knights, and they'd be taken off for stabling over there. And it must have been a cute, fantastic sight, really, because the castle must have been positively glowing with candlelight and firelight. And Edward was a sort of party animal. He liked to entertain, he liked to party. Very young man, that's what he liked to do. And when he came, it was the great and good came here to see him, pay their taxes and make sure that they were on the right side of him. And we know it must have been a good celebration because it didn't leave until almost Easter 1363. So quite a party going on. But unfortunately for the castle, the good times were about to end. That's the heyday. The golden era, if you like, of the castle is just walked out the door with Edward and Joan going off to France. We don't think they ever returned here, and that signals a long period of decline. Various dukes didn't want to take on the castle. The tin industry is beginning slowly to fade, so there's not so much money coming in. And even as we're talking about the English Civil War, which is nigh on 300 years later, the castle's in a poor state of repair, and that's what's befallen it over the years. And although it's been neglected, it's been good news in some ways, because as we said about the English Civil War, the parliamentarians were betrayed and somebody let the royalists in and they were taken prisoner. But it did also mean that the castle didn't undergo a siege. The royalists had some very big cannon around it. They would have just laid waste to this. It was never built to withstand cannon balls, even 17th century ones, but it didn't. And it didn't get attacked, but it just is allowed to decline, and that's the way it goes on for hundreds of years. In more recent years, and since the 17th, 18th century, the estate has been managed, and the various managers of the estate, or the lease on the estate, would see the castle as being just part of their garden. Oh, look what we've got in our garden! You know, this wonderful folly. And it wasn't even in the 19th century. Queen Victoria came here in 1846. She and Albert on a tour of Cornwall, but came in the castle, probably had a tour just as we're doing now. I can't remember talking to her, but I'm sure she came. But she couldn't persuade the duchy to do anything about the place. They liked it, and she wrote very nice things about it, do some pictures of it. But the duchy, even though her son Edward was the Duke of Cornwall, nothing was done about it. Even years later, in 1903, George V came here when he was the Duke of Cornwall, and again, nice picture of him standing about, but nothing happens. So you get the idea. The castle become very neglected, and it went on like that for a few more years until we get into the 20th century, and it's until about 1923, 25 that the government wakes up to the fact, or some bright spark in the government's then Department of Works realised, Restormel Castle, actually that is pretty unusual, we ought to do something about it. So they then begin a project of clearing back all the foliage and reclaiming the walls and doing a bit of patching up. This still belongs to the duchy, although it was then managed by the government's Department of Works. And then when we get to about 1980, English Heritage sort of emerging and we take it over. And then for the last few years, it's been completely, English Heritage been independent. So we do rely greatly on you good folk for either membership or admission fees to keep us going. So that's brought us all the way up to the present day. Told us wasn't going to be a linear tour through this. So we're going to, if you're okay for a few more minutes, we're going to do a quick circle, quick sweep through the apartments of the castle, and I'll try and explain what they were. So, we know we've done this bit, Edward the Black Prince's kitchen. This is the kind of serving area, the preparation room, and here we have, what all good kitchens have is the serving hatch. Quite big because you have to get some substantial trays in here to be loaded up with half a venison or whatever it was that we're going to have. Now, you and I might think that having been loaded up with these big trays, these poor servants would go straight through that door there and in up to the apartment for the entertaining. That isn't the way it was done. They were not allowed to go within and up, they had to go without and up. So they would stagger through the door here, turn right, and we think there was a substantial wooden exterior staircase which would lead them into the inner hall here. So that was their way in and out, and we're going to go this way into the inner hall. We looked at this from the outside. We could see the big windows, and in the guidebook and over here, to help with imagination, it is an artist's recreation of what it looked like. So this was quite a substantial room, unusual curve to it because of the circular wall. It had a big timber ceiling, big wooden trusses giving an oval barrel-shaped ceiling. So been quite impressive. We are in what were the cellars. This is the working area where stuff was stored and the servants would go about their business. But above us here, just above this line, because it's the joists where the big timbers were, this is where the parties went on. So this is where Edmund would have his Christmas bash and subsequent events and so on. And when, in the evening, when it was candlelit, it must have been stunning as well. And when they weren't entertaining in here, just to add to their comfort, there's another little fireplace within the window recess there, so they could sit in there, looking out through the window, the glazed window, sitting by a nice cosy little fire, and they could bring in screens as well to shield them from the drafts, because medieval castles are quite drafty. So it could be quite cosy, even in here. And we've got a big fireplace here for proper entertaining when they've got guests here. And if during all this revelry the disco music got a bit loud and they wanted to get away from it, they would go through a doorway there, through into the inner hall here. This is kind of the chill out room. This is where the Earl or Dukes and their guests would come just to get away from the noise, just to chill out and relax. Again, there's a fireplace there, nice big picture window, and if the weather was good and they wanted to go outside, they had their own private staircase going up beyond that fencing there, up onto the wall walk. Not for the servants, they couldn't use that. If the lords and the ladies and their guests wanted anything, the servants would be ordered, they would go outside, up the stairs there and come right round the wall walk. They did not go through the inner staircase, not for them at all. So again, this was the sort of chill out room. We're going out that way to explore a bit more of the other apartments. Very quickly, here is one of a number of pits that are within the perimeter, and this is what I was saying earlier. There was a lot of conjecture over the years as to what these were. We're now pretty sure that they formed part of the earlier castle that predates the circular one here. So quite early Norman, and whether they were parts of towers or what, we don't really know. But there are a number of them, and there's another one going this way here. Another more interesting one perhaps here, got the foot of which is the well. The well is part of the original castle. How it actually configured into the design of the castle, we're not exactly sure. That was the well. I said there was a running water supply which Edmund had put in when he built this castle here. The archway here was built when the new castle was created in the 13th century to support this inner circular wall. That's what it was. The actual use of the pit itself, we don't know. We think there must have been some sort of probably wooden contraption going over here so you could actually get down to the well. The hole in the wall going that way is what the guidebook and this plaque on the wall describe as an unexplored tunnel, which is true, but a bit of a spoiler alert. It is unexplored, but we do know a wee bit about it. We know it goes about 6 feet and then it ends. Now, whether that is because it's collapsed or has been deliberately blocked and that there's a crock of gold and a stash of treasure beyond it, we simply don't know. Or whether it was part of an unfinished project, we simply don't know. If you're about 4 years old, that's where the dragon lives. I prefer that story myself, but you can draw on it, make your own ideas. So, We come around then from the inner hall to the chapel. The chapel here, as I said, which Edmund had created, dedicated to St Mary, lavishly appointed in its day. We think there was probably a crypt down here somewhere. So a bit of evidence for that is that in the 18th century, somewhere around 1753, some guys were doing a bit of digging around here, and they came across two armour-clad skeletons, arm in arm and clutching swords. And we think they were probably victims of the Civil War battle that was going on around here. We don't know what happened to them, whether they were reinterred beyond that wall or whether they're propping up somebody's staircase in Lostwithiel. No idea. We haven't got documentation on it. Anyway, that's chapel here, and then we move around to another quite interesting, well, very interesting room. Again, the lower area below these big holes, which would have been the joist holding up the floor. This is all working area, storage area, guard room as well, we think, is where, and there was a guard here, this is probably where they would have been housed. Again, another of these mystery pits here. Big picture window, because in the first floor, this is the Lord's apartment. There's no reference to the ladies' apartment, but the Lord's apartment. Big picture window. Fireplace over here, would have been very well appointed, running water in it, so nice and cosy. For its time, that is. So we move around to the next room through here. We've probably got another guard room, maybe used for the guards' equipment, certainly used for storage, may in later years have been used for smelting. We're not sure about that, but there's evidence that there may have been a small furnace in there. We don't know that. This is the loo that we were looking at from the outside. This is the 13th century loo, all creature comforts, nice big plank went across it with several holes in it, and communal activity. There you are, but I say, please don't use it. And again, this room is significantly different from the others because it's got no outer facing window. The only windows face this way. There was no access to it other than by a door here, which was entered via this staircase. That's because it's called the wardrobe. Wardrobe, not where you kept your Sunday suit, but where all the goodies and the valuables were kept when the lords and the ladies weren't here. Everything would be taken off the walls, all the hangings and the pictures, all the good silver and everything would be all put into great big trunks, brought in here, secured away, no access at all. So that was a kind of strong one. When they came, the reverse was true, it was all taken out and put around the house. We think there may have been small stabling in here as well for probably no more than half a dozen horses, because as I was saying earlier, outside in the outer ward, in the bailey, was stabling for a significant number of horses. So that brings us right round to the porter's lodge here, which is where we came in, which it may have been in. There's a plaque, information board in the porter's lodge there, which says that it was an unheated space, which must have made life extraordinarily uncomfortable for the poor old porter, who was there in the dead of night waiting the duke to arrive, and it was snowing or something. He'd got no heating in there, but that's what it says, so I've got to accept that. Maybe that was to keep him awake, I've no idea. But there we are. So that's it. Complete tour done. We're back to present day. So any questions at all? I've left shed loads of stuff out. We do know that the outer space, the circular, the keep here, that wasn't surfaced. It's always been open. All the apartments were roofed. As you can see, you get the idea of how it was roofed from looking at this pitched roof here. That went all the way around, so it's like a house roof. So that was roofed. This was open and always had been, and the floors possibly flagged, but we don't really know that.
Thank you very much.